when I ran for office in '08 for sheriff, there was an active case on an open homicide. It was Rene Williams. She was abducted from the local VFW bar here. Um, she'd never been found. Nobody had been arrested. Nobody had been charged. I actually kind of ran my campaign on the fact that I thought I could solve that case. I knew quite a bit about it, even though I wasn't in law enforcement here at the time. But just a small community, you hear a lot, and so I took office in 2009. Immediately began working on that case in January of '09. I believe it was August of '09. Actually got a break in the case, and I mean, Chris Revac was my suspect from the very beginning. I went over the case file that was here. There were some other people of interest that they had interviewed and went a different direction, and I kind of looked at them and went and tried to rule them out as suspects, and everything kept coming back to Revac. Um, Looking at it, and I just one day I thought, man, I don't think this is his first time. Obviously we haven't found the body. I don't think this was his first time. And so I did a Google search. I just Google searched the places that he had lived. So I'd ran a comprehensive report on him that showed everywhere he had lived. That there was some type of documentation, whether it be through an electric bill, a driver's license. One of the places that it showed was Wisconsin Rapids. I Google searched women abducted from bars in Wisconsin Rapids, and lo and behold, the first thing that popped up was Diedre Harm and a composite drawing that looked to me identical to be Chris Revac. That was about July when I did that of 2009. Of course, I called the authorities in Wood County. I'm like, hey, I think I know who your guy is. I sent them a picture. They're like, hey, can you place him here during that time frame? I already had his work records and everything from his work, and I was actually able to look in his work records and see the leave request that showed that he had put on there that he was going to be at a family function in Wisconsin Rapids during the time that Diedre Harm was abducted. So that's kind of what got me really going on Diedre Harm. And of course, I'd been working the Rene Williams side of things since, from January of that year.
And talking a little bit more about Rene Williams, can you tell me a little bit about, just the circumstances surrounding her disappearance and then the evidence that you guys found as far as, what led you to believe that she was dead?
When I went through the case file, she was abducted from the bar. The evidence that they had from the previous investigators before I took office, there was some blood at the scene on the concrete. There was obviously her vehicle was still there. Um, it did obviously she hadn't left willing. I mean, there was blood at the scene. So Chris Revac was actually a person of interest kind of right in the very beginning. I know the previous sheriff had served a search warrant on his vehicle, actually sent investigators to his house just days after the disappearance. As a matter of fact, the day after. Um, he had an injury to his thumb. He played that off that he'd slammed it in the car door. Really, at that time, nobody really did anything else, as far as like searching or doing anything at that time. Later on, they did do a search warrant on his vehicle. He worked for the Taney County Ambulance District. They were able to get a search warrant for the vehicle. Her blood and DNA was found in that vehicle. So obviously he was their suspect. Everything just kind of went stale. They didn't have a body. They didn't have a witness. They didn't have anything at that time. So when I took office, that's what I kind of had to work with. I ended up talking to Chris Revac's wife, and I got her away from him. I felt she knew more than what she had told in the beginning. So I got her away, did an interview with her. She actually talked to me about the fact that she remembered the night. He came home, he had the injuries. He came home late. She didn't, the next day after investigators had been there, he told her he needed her to help her on the hill behind their house. He went up there, she went up. At that time, she's seen Rene Williams actually lying on the ground, deceased. She took off running. He caught her, basically threatened to kill her mom and her sister if she didn't help load Rene into the vehicle. And then Rene was taken to several counties over, where he allegedly buried her remains. Johanna did take me to that spot. I spent weeks there. I wasn't able to come up with any remains, but the things that I did come up with is she had talked about he had buried something around the French drains in their house about that time. So we dug the French drains up around the house, and she had a tip jar that she took with her to work, or she had at work, and she'd take it with her every night. We found all the change buried in the French drains around the house, which was kind of, I mean, that's odd. I'm sure that was just kind of a keepsake for him.
Revak was arrested by the Douglas County Sheriff's Office
That's
and then was
correct.
in the jail. Tell me a little bit about what all happened there.
So essentially, when I was in Polk County, I signed officers to go arrest him at his residence that morning. I actually had Johanna with me at this remote farm. I felt that I had enough at the time with the things that her being able to drive me to that farm, the statement that I'd gotten from her to effect an arrest. I had the guys arrest him. They placed him in a holding cell. Um, I got back late that evening to do the paperwork, the probable cause affidavit for the actual warrant. And the next day I went in to talk to him and interview him. He didn't want to talk, didn't want to say nothing. I gave him the warrant. Put him on a suicide watch. It was in our old jail, so we didn't have cameras in there, but we had him on a 5-minute watch. Well, he timed it. He timed the 5-minute watch, and then as soon as they checked on him, then he actually tied a small knot in his jumpsuit, wedged it in a crack behind a light, and then just knelt down and it cut his air off. And by the time they got to him, he was deceased.
So, we've talked about, Rene Williams and Diedre Harm. How does all of that even possibly connect to Jodi? And why were you one of the people that were contacted for this docuseries?
At the time that I'd looked up, women abducted from bars in Wisconsin Rapids, I continued to look at his history of where he lived. And I believe it was in 95, his history showed that he lived there at Mason City, Iowa. And so I once again, Google searched women abducted or missing from there. She pops up, slight resemblance to Rene, the blonde hair and everything. So I contacted the authorities there and gave them the information. I said, hey, I really don't have anything other than this. I believe the guy is a serial killer. He's killed one in my county. He killed one in Wisconsin Rapids, and now we're seeing that he has some connection to Mason City, Iowa. So I gave the investigators that information. I can't remember the investigator's name, but they contacted me sometime later. What the investigators found is that his girlfriend and maybe ex-girlfriend lived next door to an acquaintance or a friend of Jodi's. So, I don't believe in coincidences. I think everything happens for a reason. I've done this for 32 years, and I just think it's odd that we have someone here who has obviously killed more than one female, and now he dates a female that lives next door to another missing female up there. So that's kind of how that got going. I contacted them, gave them that information on Revac, and then obviously they've done some interviews and some follow-up on that.
Were there any other disappearances of women that Revac was possibly connected to at all?
There was a couple that I had reached out and contacted. I can't remember all their names, but there was a couple. There was one actually in the county that he lived, not that he lived, that he worked. There was one in the county that he worked. And I contacted that sheriff, and he was confident that he knew who was responsible for that murder, and it wasn't Revac. And then it seems like there was one other agency that I had contacted just off my Google searches, just places that he was known to live or visit.
Whenever somebody reaches out to you about, this deep dive docuseries that they're doing, what kind of makes you say yes? Is this something where you think that new leads might come up because of your contributions?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that obviously they haven't closed that case. So, I mean, maybe there's something that I can say or bring to light that's going to produce a witness to come forward, some type of lead. And to be quite honest, I mean, I think it just gives law enforcement a different route to look. I mean, I know here, sometimes we worked several homicides over the years, and there's been times that maybe you get fixated on one person and you think it is that one person and you're going down that road when in reality, it's somebody else. So, I just wanted that possibility and that option out there to be looked into, and so that can't be discredited. And when we worked homicides, we worked just as hard to prove somebody didn't do it as that somebody did. So, that's something that we do here, and I just want to be able to pass that information on and hopefully get some closure for the family. I mean, it's got to be horrible what they're going through. Obviously, they still haven't found her, and maybe something that I can do to help locate her.
Something that was mentioned in the docuseries, as far as Jodi goes, is just misinformation from people online doing their own deep dives and trying to do their own research that isn't backed by law enforcement or isn't backed by fact. Can something like that help or ultimately hurt the case and people's perception of it?
Yeah, I think it does. What it does do is that misinformation is that law enforcement has to either prove that that information now is accurate or not. I know in the Rene Williams case that there was a lot of talk about the dogs tracked to the barn. I had to really get around a lot of that. And what people don't understand is sometimes dogs don't necessarily track by scent, they track by ground disturbance. And there had been people all over that place. There had been people walking. There's a lot of things that go into factor of and even if the dog is tracking by scent, there's a lot of things that go into it. How is the scent article handled? Is that a pure scent article? I think in looking back through reports that the dog that tracked that day, I think that they were tracking law enforcement from the previous day. Law enforcement had presented the scent article, and it went right to where some of the law enforcement had went that day. And doing the interviews with obviously with Chris Revak's wife and the evidence that I obtained later, there was nothing to indicate that he ever took her to that barn. He abducted her right there in the parking lot and got her into the vehicle. So those are just things that we have to work around. Yes, I particularly believe in spreading that misinformation online does definitely hurt. I think it hurts the case some, but because all you have to do is put a doubt in a juror's mind. And, so that's why it's important that we follow every lead and either prove that it was accurate information or not.
Do you have a theory of who you think it is that may have taken Jodi?
But there's multiple people that could have done it. Um, I don't know if it's because I worked the Revac case or what. I kind of lean that way a lot just because of the similarities. One, kind of the similarities of the resemblance. Two, being abducted in a parking lot. Three, um, she's never been found. Rene Williams has never been found. And, I just, there's a lot of similarities there. Now, is there evidence to back that up? Obviously, by watching it, there's not. But, I think there's enough similarities there that they can't rule out Chris Revac. And, but it's all kind of how it's spun. The show showed that, that there may have been somebody that she was having a relationship with. And, that's always want to be one of your first suspects. So, but on the flip side, I wouldn't have put it back past Chris Revac, the stalker that he was, that he wasn't trying to find his ex-girlfriend and he found Jodi.
Is there anything I haven't asked about and you haven't mentioned that you wanted to?
I think just the importance of people with information to come forward at the time they have it. So many times we have these cases and we work them and then, years later somebody says, man, I remember when that happened and I thought that was odd, but I didn't say nothing. I think it's just the importance of, hey, contact law enforcement if you think you've got information pertaining to this and let them either prove or disprove whether it's good information. And I think that hangs a lot of people up. And, we've seen it in the Rene Williams case. We've seen it in other homicides that we worked. And it's like, they'll come forward later. And I'm like, man, I wish I would have known that at the time. It would have made a big difference. So that would just be one of the things I'd like to encourage people to do. If something doesn't seem right, let law enforcement know. That's what our job is to do, is just to figure it out and see if it's legit. I would like to think, like the Wood County, all the investigators that have helped on this case. It's been many years and a lot of hours of everybody sharing notes, comparing everything, and ultimately that's how crimes like this get solved.